Getting it fired up.
How you doing, man? You guys hear me okay? Awesome.
I can.
I'm just gonna mute everybody in case, you know, the wayward dog goes crazy in the background. It saves us all from interruption. So if you guys want to, I'm not sure the best way to manage this. Honestly, first time we've done one is probably gonna have this many participants on it. There's a chat function in Zoom. If you want to send me questions, if you have questions or you got issues that you want us to get to, you can go ahead and do it there. Here's what I was thinking about doing. I'm going to tell you what we've been seeing in our client base in the last 4 weeks, and break it down into like what they were doing 2 weeks ago, what they're doing last week, what they're doing this week. And then I'm going to talk about that's our clients, which is a very distinctly different group than, let me go ahead and start recording this. Oh, it's recording. It's a very different group than the people who are starting to call and like need help, right? So we're gonna talk about the client group first. And some of you have clients that look exactly like this because you've been running them through the same stuff we do, the stuff you learned in consulting CPA, you're using that. You've got clients that are on strategic plans and they got leadership teams and they're executing, and maybe there'll be some takeaways from our client group. But then there's this whole different group that they haven't done any of the stuff that we normally do with businesses, and they're terrified, like number one, but they don't have all the stuff, and there's not really time to do what we would normally do with those businesses. So I'm going to show you what we are doing with them. And then you guys can push back, or you can add stuff you're doing, or I'll give you a link. We threw the last one, stripped out most of the information except for the real detailed example, and just threw it in a Google sheet. And I'll share that link with you when we're done. Sound good? All right, let me do this. All right, so I don't want to take for granted that when we start talking about our clients, I don't want to take for granted that everybody knows what I mean by what our clients are doing. Because some people have been through consulting CPA, some people haven't. So I'm just going to give you a brief rundown of when I say this is what our clients are doing. When I refer to these things, you kind of know what these clients have in common. Number one, they have a defined leadership team. Every single one of these clients has, you know, a CEO or general manager, but then there's a whole group of people underneath them. They're defined as the leadership team. The entire company knows this is the leadership team. They have gone through the work to identify values, vision, why, and mission, right? So some kind of ethereal stuff, but very foundational to a lot of the decisions that are being made right now. Like they're going straight to values. I cannot impress upon you enough how encouraging it has been to see these companies come back to the bedrock of values and use that to make incredibly practical, difficult decisions. They have all identified a core strategy they're pursuing for the next 2 to 3 years. Right? So they all kind of have a longer term vision, definitely a longer term vision, but even a more midterm, say, operational outlook, which obviously is kind of getting turned on its head right They all have goals for the year with detailed forecasts and spending budgets. Again, some stuff that's in flux. Everybody on that leadership team has defined priorities for the quarter, things that they are larger projects that they're working on outside of their get-togethers. Every one of these clients that I'm going to talk about has an operations scorecard that's tracking weekly numbers, financial and operational numbers in the business. And they all have a discipline for meeting together every week with a structured agenda. All right. So other things that you probably want to know that'll help you compare your situation to ours. We're in Southwest Florida. We got people from all over the country on the call. We're just south of Tampa, and our metro market's about 1 million people. It's pretty low density. We do have 2 or 3 downtown areas, but for the most part, we do not have the density that you're seeing in some of these other areas and some of you are dealing with. And what that means for us is like social distancing. It's really kind of only been the norm for about the last week and a half. Our kids here locally were on spring break 2 weeks ago. So you can imagine like a lot of travel plans got canceled and families are wondering, what are we going to do with our kids? Last week was the second week of kids home from school, and that's when we started to see restaurants going to takeout only. It's when gyms started closing. It's when churches stopped meeting about 2 weeks ago. So I don't know how long that stuff's been going on in your community, but here we're about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks into that being the new normal. So here's what we've learned from our clients. Leadership. Business leaders need to take things seriously and communicate to their employees. This is hugely important because if you're not freaking out a little bit about it, your employees are freaking out a lot about it. Like they want to come to work and know that somebody's worried about how much hand sanitizer is in the supply closet. They want to know somebody's coming to work and is thinking about what are we going to do if we get shut down. And the leadership, and when I say leadership, I'm not talking about the leadership team. I'm talking about the one person at the top. The thing that's been encouraging to us is most of our clients, not all, but most of our clients, that leader is communicating with the employees every single day, usually first thing in the morning or mid-morning after the leadership team gets together and talks about what the latest developments are. But they have to know that somebody's paying attention so that they can have some kind of peace of mind and be able to focus on the work at hand. If you're not addressing it, you're leaving that up to the water cooler, or your clients are, productivity is going to plummet. One of the things that we're figuring out is that the plans may have changed, but the planning tools, some of the stuff I mentioned earlier that they have in place, those have become absolutely indispensable. And what I mean by that is the monthly financial forecast and the trailing 12 financial forecast that we put together for these businesses as part of their strategic plan. We took those in the last 2 weeks. All of our clients had those. It was very, very easy for us to do stress tests on the financials with stuff that was already in the folder. We didn't have to go gather information. We didn't have to go out and pull stuff out of QuickBooks or get downloads from their accounting system. Having monthly and trailing 12 financials was a huge advantage for this business is trying to run stress tests. The weekly scorecards. I think it's fair to say we've talked on our team how about 4 weeks ago, a lot of our teams were kind of cruising past the weekly scorecard review in their operations meetings. Right now, the very first thing that they want to look at is what does the weekly scorecard look like? The weekly scorecard has given these businesses an incredible jump start on understanding what the market effects are on the business within the last 7 days. And they've really come to appreciate it. Some of the scorecards are changing. We got a business owner say, can we convert our scorecard to daily? That's how valuable it's been, and they want the data even faster. Having budgets to forecast with detailed cash flows has been huge. And again, so the stress test, when I say stress test, that's kind of the 50,000 foot view, looking at the next year's financials, the next 9 months financials, and saying, what kind of overall percentage decline, like just bucket overall percentage decline in sales could we experience and not use up our cash reserves? But when it comes down to the weekly cash forecast and understanding what are the next 4 to 6 weeks going to look like, because they're certainly going to be different from the weeks after that. We're going to have everything that I'm reading says here locally, we're 2 to 3 weeks away from even being close to the peak in terms of infections and the repercussions. So we expect sales to decline considerably across all of our businesses over the next few weeks, and then to come back after that. Well, that's where the big bucket analysis falls apart, and we have to be able to forecast by month or even week with some businesses. And having budgets to forecast is making that pretty easy. Accountability and org charts. So you guys know I'm a big fan of accountability charts versus org charts. The org charts are big on titles. The accountability chart simply outlines the 3 or 4 core responsibilities for that particular position. All of our clients have those, which means when we're talking about what are the essential functions of the business, and if we have to make some very difficult decisions, who are we going to have to lay off? Those accountability charts are on every business owner's desk this morning, multiple versions of them with multiple scenarios about what functions might have to be consolidated, what people might have to be let go. Having that stuff in the file was huge. Here's what they've been doing for the last 4 weeks. 4 weeks ago, we sat down with an HVAC company that has about 125, 130 employees. And to be honest, guys, this was nowhere near my radar. We weren't even thinking about coronavirus. It was a monthly news story or a nightly news story that was coming out of China. And yeah, there had been some rumblings about some stuff happening in Seattle. And when we were in this operations meeting, somebody said, hey, should we be doing anything about this? And we picked it up as an issue in terms of our agenda. You guys know, we have issues time. So that was one of the issues, one of maybe 2 issues that we addressed that morning. And they were way ahead of the curve. A week later, we started to get a little bit more serious about it. By the end of, I'd say 2 weeks ago Friday, I canceled my vacation plans. It was all hands on deck. We were meeting with every single client trying to figure out what does the plan look like. So about 4 weeks ago, we came out of that meeting and we did say our biggest takeaway from that meeting was if we have work in the pipeline, we need to do everything possible to get that work through production. Get those air conditioners installed, look forward at all the maintenance programs that are scheduled to have updates over the next 3 weeks. How many of them can we crunch into the next week and a half, 2 weeks? We left that meeting, went to another meeting with a different client, and the subject of overtime came up. And the decision was made to incur whatever overtime necessary. Didn't matter. We have to get this revenue on the books. We have to get the work done. We have to get the invoices out, and we have to try to get some cash flow in because nobody knows what the future weeks are going to hold. And we got the orders, and people are still going to work, so let's get it done. So they were scheduling as much work as possible. 4 weeks ago, they also started taking precautions just to keep things clean. We have one of our clients email us and say, hey, we're wiping down the office twice a day, and then it's getting cleaned at night. So 3 times a day, we're kind of going through every surface is getting wiped down with Lysol wipes or diluted bleach. We're taking precautions to make sure that people are washing their hands and not touching their face and all that stuff. They also started reaching out to customers, and they started assuring employees. Now, some of them assured employees better than others. The group that I said, kind of kicked this thing off, the very next day, they started sending out updates to the team. What they've been doing the last 2 weeks. So like I said, the last 2 weeks, we've really kind of started to see crunch time here hit with the realization kids aren't going back to school. Businesses are closing. Restaurants have closed. Churches don't meet. We don't know when or if schools are going to get back this year. So businesses in the last 2 weeks really started accommodating employees who needed to work from home to take care of kids. We see a lot of laptops leaving the office or even desktops getting unplugged. I got to tell you, the companies that went to voice over IP phones have never been more grateful that they made that switch, because employees are taking those things home. They're recording little videos like, here's what the back of your cable router looks like. Here's where you plug it in. And we got employees taking phone calls from the living room at their extension, which has been really nice. And for the most part, I'd say in the offices, headquartered offices, where we see 20 to 30 employees that might be working with 100 plus field crew people. Probably 30% of those people are working from home, or were working from home last week. I'd say it's probably closer to 50% this week. We have one company that does lien searches and estoppel searches for real estate transactions. They have about 30 researchers. Every single one of them is working from home. So some businesses it translates very well. Others obviously not so much. Other thing they've been getting learned how to do last week is use this little program called Zoom. It has become an indispensable part of their workflow. What they've been doing last week we had a lot of difficult conversations about laying off non-performing employees. Now, the conversations we've had about layoffs so far have not been laying off workforce to downsize. Conversations that we had last Thursday, maybe Friday. Look, I got a business development person, really haven't produced any results. I know it's not a time to be pulling money out of marketing, but I'm having a harder and harder time making the case that we might be experiencing layoffs, and we got people here who really aren't producing, and we should have been talking about letting them go before this happened. Those are the kind of layoffs that we've seen the most. And it's been, probably 2%, 3%, 4% of the workforce at most. It's not across the board. The other thing that they started doing last week and a little bit the week before is calculating how long their cash reserves are going to last under different circumstances, different scenarios, and getting their ducks in a row to apply for stimulus loans. Probably one of the most frustrating parts for the business owners is all of the mass media attention to this $300 billion of essentially payroll-based loans. And absolutely no mention whatsoever of how we're going to go about getting this money. And I had a client, text me, I guess last Thursday and said, "Hey, the bill's passed. Let's get my stuff in." And I'm like, well, it hasn't passed. It was, in one house, but not the other. And then he sent me another text message on Friday. "Hey, I just saw the president pass it. Send my stuff in." I'm like, dude, I don't even know where to send it. And so my best guess from everything I've been reading, and if you guys know different, please enlighten me, that this is going to go through local lenders. This is going to be something we have to go to banks, and God only knows what kind of variations there are going to be in underwriting when it gets to the local level. So that's, we're just kind of waiting on that. But we've run the payroll calculation figures. We know what 2.5 times payroll is. We have monthly sales records if they ask for substantiation on that. We have monthly payroll records. Just trying to get everything we can lined up so that when they do, if they want to, and that is a question. That's one of the things I want to talk about today. It's a question whether you want to take these stimulus loans, depending on what kind of industry you're in and what kind of sales decline you're going to be looking at. So the clients, they are in pretty good shape, I feel like. Probably two or 3 weeks ago, I made the mistake of coming in on a Saturday, and I got my head into like 2 hours of news reports, and I was freaked out. I was not in a good place. My wife can tell you I was a disaster. And one of the heartening things over the last 2 weeks is to see just how good a shape our clients are in. So I'm very, very thankful for that. And they're not very freaked out. I'm sure that it's hard for some of them to go to sleep at night, but for the most part, they've got great plans. They've got cash reserves. Honestly, they haven't started seeing the sales decline yet. We're telling them, get ready for it. It's coming. You're going to have to deal with the sales decline sooner or later. But the clients that are showing up now, not clients, but I call them prospects, businesses, it's kind of like when people know you do tax returns, and like every cocktail party you go to, somebody, wants some tax advice. When people find out that you help businesses and, you help them grow, and you look at financial and operational stuff, and people find that out, there's no shortage of people knocking on the door saying, "Can you help me save my business?" which, it's a great opportunity. I'm trying to temper my enthusiasm for the opportunity with the desire just to try to help these people out as best we can, because honestly, it's moving so fast. We don't have time to slow down and even think about what a future engagement might look like with these people. And you'll see kind of the triage that we're going through in just a second. We're just trying to help them understand in the next 24 to 48 hours, what are you going to have to do, and can you to survive this? They don't have plans. They're pretty much terrified. Here's the other thing. They are suckers for good news and reassurance. It would be very, very easy for us to sign up a lot of these businesses, and I'm seeing this in the industry, and it pisses me off. It'd be very, very easy for us to sign up these businesses saying, you can make this, the stimulus plan will get you through it, give us $2,500 and we'll help you fill out a loan application, or give us $5,000 and we'll clean up your accounting and get you squared away. They will eat that up. They're just looking for a lifeline. And if you throw it to them, you don't even have to prove that it's valid. They will grab it up. Some of these businesses need to hear the truth. They need to look at the numbers and look at the situation and understand what's really going on. And you may be the only person who's willing to share that with them. And that would be my encouragement to you this morning is people are going to be coming to you looking for hope. And if it's a hopeless situation, you owe it to them to just say, look, let's sock away the cash that we have. Let's try to live for another day. But I'm not going to blow smoke up your, what. You have to deal with the facts as they are. So again, I don't want to be alarmist, but I see people in our industry who are doing the exact opposite. And they're painting these incredibly rosy pictures, and their bank accounts are filling up, and they're doing just fine. And it kind of bothers me. Some of these businesses are not going to make it. And here locally, these are kind of what we call hurricane businesses, right? These are businesses that wouldn't make it through any kind of prolonged disruption. If a hurricane comes through Florida, one of the things we know from the areas that have been hit is that virtually no money changes hands privately for about 60 to 90 days. I mean, you think about it. If your building gets wiped off the map, you might have online access to your bank account, but you're usually not collecting any more money from customers. The last thing on your mind is paying your vendors. Like, I got my own problems. I don't have a building anymore. I got a building that's full of water. I got a building without a roof. And a lot of these businesses that, would experience the kind of shutdown scenario with a storm that just took cash away for 14 or 30 or 45 days, they're not going to make it through this. And if they don't have cash reserves and they can't turn off the spigot fast enough, that's going to be a problem. So the stimulus is kind of their Hail Mary. And for some of them, it's going to work, but for some of them, it's not. Here's the other thing. Those of you who've been through the consulting CPA, how we onboard clients, right? We do strategic assessments. And the strategic assessment is that it's like 4 to 6 weeks of crawling inside the business. But it's designed to answer one fundamental question. The strategic assessment is designed to ask, what kind of shape is this business in for strategic growth? And that is not the question that we're trying to answer right now. The question that we're trying to answer right now is, what do I have to do to survive until 2021? If the business already has done the strategic planning, they've been through the strategic assessment process, they got a plan, it's in place, they're executing, we're looking at a lot of our clients, and it's not going to be a banner year this year, but it'll be a ridiculous year next year, because they're in position to sustain sales declines, but at the same time pick up market share. Because a lot of businesses are going to go under, and those customers are going to have to go somewhere. Those employees, we've had a huge labor shortage, especially in skilled trades in this area. And that's about to be resolved. We are not going to have a labor shortage in skilled trades, because a lot of the 3, 4, 5 person companies that had skilled electricians, skilled plumbers, skilled ACs, skilled mechanics, they may not make it. And those people are going to have to find a job somewhere else. And the companies that had 100 mechanics or 100 plumbers, they're not going to be in hiring mode for maybe 6 months or so. But when they are, they're going to be people in the market. So the businesses that are just trying to survive, they don't have the time, and unless they've been stockpiling cash, it's a very legit question whether they're going to survive. So let me show you what we're doing and give you a sense for the kind of questions you might be asking some of these businesses. And some of these might be clients, some of them might be friends and family members, some of them might be brand new prospects knocking on your door. I'll send you a link to this, and you can use it. And God only knows what's missing from this. I mean, we've been trying to put this together as we go, and it gets a little bit bigger every time. But the first thing we want to understand is, do you have accurate financial data? And I'm not talking about, has your QuickBooks been tied out to the last 10 years worth of tax returns? I want to know when the last monthly close was, and then the following balances as of whatever date we're talking about. So cash, there's a number here because we use it later. Otherwise, we pulled out the stuff. Current accounts receivable, 0 to 30 days, 30 to 60 days. We're basically saying if it's over 60 days, don't count on getting it. It probably is not going to happen. We don't even care about this number. We do put it on here because we care about it to the extent that it shows us how much attention they've been paying to receivables. And if they haven't been paying a lot of attention to receivables and they start calling customers trying to chase money in the door, it's almost certainly going to come across as desperation, not sound business practice. So it does give us some insight into that. From their most recent payroll ledger, the fully loaded costs. So for these purposes, I want to know basically what got pulled out of their bank account for payroll, for benefits, for taxes. I don't care in these early stages. I'm not really interested what the split was. And whether it was weekly, bi-weekly, semi-monthly, or monthly, when the last time it was funded, and what did that get us paid through? Just so we have an expectation of when the next hit's going to come. Their monthly rent or mortgage payment. Have they entered into any discussions with the landlord or the bank about forbearance, the last time it was paid and when the next payment's due? All right, so that's table stakes. We can't even get started unless we have some basic numbers. And then we start to talk about sales. So this is a conversation. Pretty much most of this is a conversation, so we get to the homework part. So I want to know the current backlog in dollars of revenue and the weeks expected to complete it. So I talked to a business owner the other day. He said we got about 6 weeks worth of work if I have everybody sitting here working. And for us, that's going to be about $180,000 in revenue. Okay, that's good to know. We got $180,000. The next thing I want to know is, have you already collected some of that $180,000? Is it unearned revenue on the books? Are those contracts cancelable? And are we already seeing people cancel contracts? So if I got 6 weeks worth of backlog on the books, but yesterday it was 8 weeks, and the day before that it was 10 weeks, then I know we probably have an issue if customers are canceling contracts. How long is it going to take us to invoice that, and when are we likely to get paid for it? When's the cash going to show up? Do we have the inventory, or are we going to have to go out and convince the supplier to give it to us on terms? And then a couple of things that we run. QuickBooks makes this pretty easy. There's a report called Revenue by Customer Summary. So you might run that for the last year, sort it by amount to see who the biggest customers are, and then calculate the percentage of revenue for that particular customer. What we're looking for is, if you got one customer that's 30% of your revenue, when was the last time you talked to them? What kind of shape are they in? Do they need what you're selling, or are they, there's nobody in the office? That was a scenario. They called us because the customer wasn't picking up the phone anymore, and they had an employee drive by, and there was nobody in the customer's parking lot. So they're like, that was our payroll for the next 6 weeks. What are we going to do now? So what customer concentration risk is it? Cross-reference with open receivables and aging. So what we mean here is, in Excel, if you get the customer sales by summary report, and then you export also like some kind of receivables aging report or receivables aging summary, you can do some interesting things with like VLOOKUP formulas and just say, okay, this customer, we sold 80% or we sold 20% of our revenue last year was this customer, and they also account for 60% of our accounts receivable. Like those are some of the warning signs We're not digging super deep into that, just trying to fly at a really high level, but we do want to understand whether any of your major customers have recently gotten behind on their bills. What indications do we have from foot traffic, web traffic, or call volume? So, if you're in a retail business, you don't have a customer sales by summary report. Your customers are kind of nameless, faceless, sales in the accounting software. Maybe you have a separate database. That's a different issue. But what are you seeing in terms of foot traffic into your establishment? Or what are you seeing in terms of web traffic if people buy from you online? Or what are you seeing in terms of call volume that gets filtered over to sales as sales leads? We need some indication of where things have been heading in recent days. Like, this was really hard a week and a half ago. You should think a week and a half ago, a lot of these businesses, they got sales locked up in a system that's not going to tell you there's like some kind of sales ledger or sales journal we can get out, but it's not very good. And the most recent data we had was 229. So you're like, I'm trying to make decisions based on sales numbers that were not even touched by the stuff we're experiencing right now. That just got a little bit easier. As farther we get into March, we got companies going to be closing sales ledgers into financials here the next day or so. So we'll have some interesting information come out. Is your business in an essential industry? We started 2 or 3 weeks ago to chart the different states and how they were classifying essential businesses. And then as more and more places started, and then as governors became more reticent to do statewide shutdowns and left that up to local municipalities, it kind of became overwhelming. But we were trying to figure out, like, what is the general consensus about what's essential? Obviously, bars, restaurants, barbers, gyms, health clubs, they're not going to make the cut. But can our AC technicians continue to drive around, and service AC units? Are plumbers going to be able to stay on job sites and finish new construction? That's what we're trying to figure out. And so, if you are in an essential industry, like one of our clients got a letter the other day saying they make a component that's used by a company in Louisiana that provides boats to the Coast Guard. And they said, basically, you are an essential member of the supply chain. You cannot shut down. And we'll pay whatever it costs for you to stay open. We have to keep these products coming. So that's a huge issue. If you have a business that's in an essential industry, it obviously bodes well. Layoff considerations. If they don't have an org chart, we make them come up with one right there on the spot. Identify the essential positions, identify the capacity of individuals to sustain pay cuts. This is usually the tier right below the owners. So you got a sales manager, you got an operations manager, you got a customer service manager, and you got an IT person. Can each one of these people take a 30% pay cut? I go, well, everybody can, but the sales manager, he's locked into a mortgage or something like that. He can't take a pay cut. But those are conversations we're having to have. And then identify essential positions that can telework so that if we did get a statewide or a local mandate to shut down, those people could continue to function. And then you have to figure out some stuff on homework. You need to understand what the monthly non-negotiable recurring expenses are. So monthly non-negotiable recurring expenses, it's funny, like this category, there's getting more and more nuance to this. I got emails from some vendors this morning that service clients in the insurance industry, and they're like, here's what we can do for your insurance premiums during this time. So, like insurance used to be non-negotiable. Now it's getting negotiated down, at least for a short time period. But basically, what are the things that you're going to have to pay to keep the doors open? Utility bills, insurance could be one of them. Every business is a little bit different, but there's some stuff that's like, what is the minimum it takes? And then monthly rent or mortgage payments, we want to know that. Even if we're in forbearance discussions, we want to know what the monthly rent or mortgage payments are, and then other required debt service. And here's what we're trying to answer. What sales declines can be sustained without affecting payroll or the cash balance? This is basically a break even from a cash flow perspective. We're telling our clients that's your best scenario. If sales decline, but we're still able to cash flow the business and we don't have to dip into reserves, that would be a great scenario. Sales declines that will eliminate the cash balance by the end of this year, that's a bad scenario. So if you have $500,000 in the bank and we're going to use up $500,000 of cash between now and December 31st, that's the bad scenario. Right? And then we have sales levels that are 50 to 75% of the bad scenario. We call that horrible. And then 25 to 50% is kind of the breaking point. That's the point at which you go, what other options do we have? So let me show you, expand this so you guys can see it. Everybody see that? All right, so this is very rudimentary. This is gonna make the inner accountant in you, a little bit twitchy because it is super high level and it's gonna be full of errors. But cash collected from sales and accounts receivable is basically the cash that's coming in the door. Sometimes this takes some work to get at, depending on if they got a huge receivables balance out there that's supposed to be paid any day now. This number may fluctuate quite a bit. But we're just trying to understand, what's going to be coming in on credit terms and cash payments. Then purchases that are required, accounts payable to suppliers. So this does not include labor. This is just the materials piece. What are you going to have to continue to send your vendors, your supply houses, to continue to have them providing product for you? And then the monthly non-negotiable recurring expenses from above, monthly rent or mortgage payments. You can see in this one, we are saying let's see if we can get forbearance for at least 3 months from the landlord. This was a monthly rent account. And then there's this. We may also try to forbear. These are vehicle payments. There's some vehicles that are company owned that are costing about $3,000 a month. And we may try to push these out. The biggest concern here was liability. If we're not making payments, and at least one of them's a lease scenario, are we going to potentially open up to liability if somebody gets into an accident? And then our payroll spend. So the way we start this is kind of our normal payroll spend, minus those 1, 2, 3% of people you probably should have fired already. What is that? What is our unadjusted payroll spend right now? And that gets us our net cash change. Here you can see there's the 2.5 month hopeful stimulus that this client wants to figure if they can get. And then this client actually is not doing, from a cash perspective, $264,000 in the bank. So they've got some options. But then here's what you do. You just play with these numbers. We also put what are we bringing in sales? And this number from last year is not cash collected from sales and AR. It's just the sales number. And the thinking is, in a normal year with none of this craziness going on, we're going to be selling, we're going to be collecting some cash sales from those sales, but we're going to be collecting AR from the prior month, and we're going to be rolling some sales into next month from a cash basis. But at least gives us a benchmark. So then you start playing with these numbers. So what I'll do here, I'll just show you. If we take the bad, we put the bad back in here. So this business, it's like something may have changed. So if we do these numbers, they'll finish the year with $118,000 in cash. So they're using up a good chunk of their existing cash, but not all of it. And then you can see here they burn through all of the existing cash. Oh, I know why they didn't burn through the cash, because the first time we ran it without the stimulus. Here they go $145,000 in the hole. So here's what you have to do. If you go $145,000 in the hole, this obviously is not an option anymore, right? We can't spend money we don't have. Now, if we get the stimulus, that could be the answer to this. But assuming there was no stimulus to bank on, we have to say, what are the employees we're going to have to lay off? Like, you go back to your accountability chart and we start saying, we're going to have to cut 145,000, 150,000 out of payroll. And that doesn't have to be across the board. This is where you get into saying, well, we'll furlough some employees here and maybe we'll be able to pick them back up later, or we'll get some stimulus money. But you guys are CPAs, you can figure out, how to change the model. But that's the basis of it. We're trying to give clients an understanding, and not clients. We're trying to give these businesses who are just looking for a lifeline a sense of whether the stimulus is going to make sense. For this business, this was a very small logistics company, and they do have some contracts that qualify them as essential, but in all likelihood, they're going to lose those contracts. So if they're looking at minimum levels of sales, they also had a huge customer that was a big chunk of their revenue. So if we go into this business and we say, this is where I want to caution businesses. Should you get the stimulus? I say, well, if the stimulus is predicated on you keeping payrolls level for 8 weeks, so you could say, I'm gonna let some people go here. But if you did $125,000, you're still going to go $125,000 in the hole. So the stimulus is not the answer. I mean, you may get the stimulus, but if let's say it's funded in May, and you got to keep payrolls level for June and July, and then you're going to have to cut. I mean, what are you going to have to cut to? Would $20,000 out of pocket do it? Barely. So is that a scenario that you want to pursue? Do you want, there's a lot of unknowns about the stimulus money we don't know. They're saying 3 weeks, but I don't know. I mean, it's a big unknown. It's a big gamble to say, I'm going to incur $100,000 of expense when I've only got $36,000 of sales coming in, banking that the government is going to be able to get me this money in 3 to 4 weeks. So I'll send this to you guys. If you have other suggestions or things that you're doing to help, I'm all ears. If you have questions for me that you want to ask, I'll stick around and answer them for as long as you want to ask them. There is some stuff in comments. Let me just say a few other things. So, I get faulted for being an eternal optimist, right? So I'm usually a very optimistic person. I can see, opportunity around every corner, and that hasn't stopped. I mean, our clients, we are actively engaged in identifying opportunities they can take advantage of. How can they pivot? How can they help competitors and potentially join up with those competitors when this blows over? How can they align themselves with complementary service providers? All that stuff, right? Innovating to the max, trying to make lemonade out of lemons. But the thing that you need to realize with the businesses that we're talking about, we've been talking about for the last 20 minutes, is that the owners have to be able to sleep at night and think with a clear head in the morning. And if they don't, if survival is in question and you can't point them to a worst case cash flow projection that's still going to have some money in the bank for them to continue to pay their employees, innovation sounds great. They are not going to have the mental horsepower or the wherewithal to think out of the box and create new things and to take the risks that are associated with that kind of innovation. So yeah, I get it. There are opportunities and there's great stories of people doing stuff that's pivoting their business, and they're gonna. I don't think most businesses are gonna innovate their way out of this. They are gonna discipline themselves to get through it, And once they have the peace of mind that's brought by the discipline, they will be able to spot opportunities. But I don't think it's realistic to expect a business owner who's looking at 30 or 40 employees and maybe the death of their business to come up with a grand idea that's going to save the day in the 11th hour. So take that for what it's worth. Chris Farman says, I have another suggestion for the loans. So Chris, if you want to jump on, unmute yourself. The floor is yours if you're still here.
Hey, Joey, thank you for putting this together. Very helpful. Adam and I have been chatting about this on the side. It's with Live Oak Bank, so they lend to a lot of breweries that I work with. And I've been talking to one of their senior lenders, and he was telling me that you mentioned first steps is to talk to your local bank. He said first steps are to go fill out the application at the SBA site, get approval that way, and then direct to which program you want to get involved, whether it's the payroll protection or the other one. So I'm still trying to get guidance on that. I have a call with my local banker here in Jacksonville after I get off with this meeting. But I don't trust that my local bank can make it happen. They're very unorganized, and very lacking in technology. So if anybody has any suggestions on, should step one be SBA website, or should step two have faith in your local community bank or local bank?
I'll jump in here. The PPP loans are only through local banks, that you can't get that through the SBA. Some of the stuff we've seen is the SBA can't even keep their website up, much less service the thousands of loans they need to fund in the next couple of weeks. And so the thought is the banks have the resources to actually roll that out.
Yeah, so so Chris, what I heard you saying is potentially you could fill out that application and then decide later if you wanted to fork it to payroll protection or the disaster recovery loan. And I don't know.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't know. I've thought about going in there and just trying to start one, but like Paul said, when I tried a couple times last week, it was down, and I would get past the first login screen and then it would go down again. And the only message I got was try from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So.
Yeah. Well, I'll find out from my banker what he's suggesting. I'll reach back out to Live Oak and see what they're suggesting, and I can get the information to you, Joey, and you can get it out there.
Yeah, Peggy asked, are any of you finding that your clients are able to negotiate rent with their landlords? And I'd say yes. The landlords are basically banking on forbearance on their mortgages and saying, hey, if we're not going to have to pay the bank, we're going to let you defer payment on the rent as well. That's happened in a couple of cases. Also have heard just kind of anecdotal evidence of people getting calls from their residential landlords saying, hey, don't worry about making your rent payment this month. We know it's crazy and we're okay. We'll let you know about next month if we have to have it. But for now, keep the money in your bank account. So Paul says, what are your suggestions for using this policy to improve internal processes, build marketing process? Okay, so good question. So Paul's saying, is there an opportunity right now to, use the slowdown to do other stuff in the business? And yeah, so we have had a couple of clients and like they're going to be just fine. It's going to suck. And it's going to take the wind out of their sales and they have to redo their sales forecast, but there's no question they're going to make through it. They got the cash reserves. We talked to a business last week. It would take a 40% decline in sales for the entire year for them to use up their cash reserves. So they're going to be fine. One of the things that we were telling businesses 3 weeks ago is, hey, drive, all that overtime and all that stuff, like just get whatever work you have in the pipeline out through the door. You can pay somebody to push a broom across the warehouse later. Like the warehouse is going to look like a train wreck for the next 3 weeks as we try to get product in here and out the door as fast as possible. And then, there's going to be a time when we don't have anything going on. And that's when we got one client that wants to install a new inventory system. I said, guess what? We are about to have a beautiful 6-week period for you to install an inventory system. And there's not going to be a lot going on. We can segregate half the warehouse and start it over there and then do the other half the following week, and it won't hold up production one bit. There was another example of some internal process stuff I'm trying to think, but essentially to Paul's point, if you got people who are you're going to be able to pay them, this is a great time to take stock of what's happening internally. And the other thing we're telling everybody is get ready, because on the other side, it depends on the business. And this kind of goes to a lot of those essential businesses. So here in Florida, we're about to get into the days when it's 100% humidity. The air conditioners are continuing to be used. Like, the air conditioner doesn't know that there's a shutdown. So it's going to break, and it's going to break in the same schedule it's always broken. And people may defer maintenance. And they may opt for a repair to keep it limping along for the next couple months until they get some certainty. But all those units are going to have to be replaced at some point. And so you can push the logjam back, but soon enough it's going to break. Roofing is another big one in this area. Like, the sun is still out. The UV rays are still doing damage to the roof. As soon as it starts raining, people can try to forestall repairs or replacements with repairs, but sooner or later they're going to have to repair. So again, to Paul's point, expect that your annual numbers may be down over last year, but it would surprise me if a lot of our businesses don't see July, August, September numbers that are considerably higher than next year. And you're only going to be able to bank those numbers if your processes can scale with them. And so if you got processes that are trying to keep up with last August, you better make them a little bit more robust, because I can almost guarantee you this August is going to be better. Any other questions you guys have? That's all I saw. There's some good chat going back and forth. You guys are helping each other out, so that's great. Anybody have any ideas of just about how we can help each other, or what you guys want to do in the next few weeks? I'm game for doing this on Mondays at 11. It's kind of an opening in my schedule if you guys think it would be helpful. It's up to you. Okay. Oh, there's a lot of comments just came in. So, reviewing insurance policies may be an option for relief. I've been one client who's able to file an insurance claim for business interruption. It's a small insurance carrier. Bigger commercial carriers may not provide. So on insurance policies, like I said, we've got some good friends that we collaborate with and share a lot of clients on, and they're in the insurance space, and they're already reaching out to clients with suggestions about how they can modify their coverage mid-policy period to maybe save some money. The other thing that they said is you may want to up your cyber coverage liability. It's some of the cheapest coverage you can buy, and they're expecting that cyber attacks are going to. They're already seeing huge increases. They only expect those to go up, just because people act out of panic and they're more likely to click on stuff panicked than they are on a normal day. Jeff Ketchum, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Joey. So just briefly, I was exposed to a guy's company in Detroit when I used to work there in the mid-90s. His name's Jay Alex. He went from building a one-person turnaround office to, in essence, being a billionaire and taking on McKinsey. My specific question is, when I think about opportunities for exponential growth, turnarounds come to mind. That's a part of that is a growth component, right? So growth, similar to, at least the way I see it, you know, some of the skill sets and tools that I've learned as being a part of this program, minus the debt restructuring. But if you look at what these firms do when they come in, you know, a lot of it is strategy, a lot of it's planning. It's all about execution in the short term, et cetera. And so my question is, A, does that seem viable? Because I don't really see many firms servicing that probably $10 million to $30 or $40 million company. You know, they're primarily focused on larger entities, usually 100 million plus. And then secondly, if that's a viable strategy for us, if desired, does that mean that from a marketing standpoint, we need to begin gearing some of the outreach to, you know, commercial bankers, bankruptcy attorneys, et cetera?
So let me just paraphrase your question and see if I understand it. So you're saying on the other side of this, there's going to be a lot of businesses that are going to be trying to recover. And that's kind of analogous what we would normally run into the market with a business that's trying to go through a turnaround. And there's just going to be a lot of those in the market. So should we kind of tailor our services to take into account maybe more turnaround scenarios than we normally would? Is that?
Yeah, and with that's very well put, well summarized, but I wouldn't say on the back end of this.
Okay.
Because if you look at some businesses right now, I mean, they're going to be there in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
You know, or a month or so.
Yeah. So yeah, the interesting thing, like go back to how we started the call. It has been very encouraging and also very validating to us. Just how resilient the strategic planning and execution and coaching process and discipline is, and how well these companies are doing. I mean, if you think about, you know, a couple of conversations I've had with businesses that aren't in that group, right? And they're coming to us and we're kind of going through this spreadsheet that I just showed you. It's like, so how is your leadership team responding to this? We're like, what leadership team? Well, you got 50 employees. Like, who runs the company when you're not there? Well, you know, I always have to be there. How are you communicating with the frontline people? Well, we had a meeting yesterday with all the managers. Okay, well, what did that meeting look like? Well, we kind of went around the table and told everybody what we were doing, right? So it's like, it's all the stuff that we see when we go into a business that's never embarked in strategic planning and execution discipline. Only right now the stakes are so much higher. Like when you're like, hey, we have to make a decision today on whether or not we're going to allow 4 people to work from home that normally do customer service, right? And so we need to make that decision today because I need input from everybody. So we got to get everybody together, right? The first thing they're wondering is, what the hell's going on? Why are we having a meeting? Like, we never have meetings. And who's leading the meeting? And are we supposed to take notes? And at the end of the day, like, how do we make decisions? And once we've made a decision, how do we walk out of this room knowing who's on first and who's responsible for what? Like, and that's the chaos that is happening in probably 95% of the companies out there right now. They're forced with a crisis. They need their leadership team to act. They need them to execute. They need to be able to hold each other accountable. And they have no system or structure for doing that. And I think they're realizing that. I think they're realizing just how dysfunctional they are. And yeah, there is an opportunity to jump in and help them out. In terms of like how to do it, like honestly, I'm scratching my head. And then maybe it's because I'm not a very good business person myself, but you know, like, how do you put together an engagement where things are so in flux? And, or do you just say, hey, give me 3 hours on your calendar and access to your financial person, and let's see if we can have a productive conversation and give you some direction and give you some hope, or give it to you straight so you know what you're dealing with. And let's talk next week and give me an update, and the week after the update, and the week after the update. So yeah, I mean, there's probably the potential for me to go out and say, you know, pay us X amount, pay us $20,000, and we'll walk by your side for the next 6 weeks during this thing, and I'll be available 24/7, and we'll support your team, and we'll start to put some of these structures in place. I just think it's very difficult. I mean, number one, you guys have seen the strategic assessment process, and you know how deliberate we are about onboarding clients and deciding, who we're going to partner with over a long term. So there's something in me that gets a little bit worried about just jumping into bed with any business that's willing to give me a check. But I'm having some pretty incredible conversations and building some pretty incredible relationships through this. And I have to believe that 4 to 6 weeks from now, it will be, it will result in some ongoing client relationships. I think somebody else said it, right now I'm just trying to help. I'm just trying to do what I can to help. And it'll be noticed. I mean, your local, the beautiful thing about, we do have some people who've gone through the program that are totally virtual, right? And so they work with clients here, there, all over the place. But for the most part, most of us, I think, are serving local communities, the communities that we live in. And so, we're talking to chamber presidents. I'm talking to nonprofit members. I'm talking to, CEO roundtable groups. And they're all here in our local market. And we're just trying to do whatever we can to help people get through the next 60 to 90 days and have a business on the other side of it. And if we have a bigger business after that, that's great. If we just get back to normal and we've met some fantastic people and been able to contribute, to build our vision of having businesses make a difference in the world, that's a win too. So, and to go back to your question, I think you're going to be able to have conversations about what it would look like to grow a business and have some structure and processes and a discipline in place to do that. The other conversation that we will be having from now on is that same process that helps you grow your business is also the process that makes your business viable regardless of what the circumstances are in the market around you. It's a great hedge against all the negative crap that can happen. It's not just being able to grow. It's essentially, in this case, it's going to be the difference between a business surviving and a business not surviving. Sandra, most of my clients are tax only. I'm struggling how to convince them to add another service. Thoughts? So Sandra, I would say, like the worksheet that we just went through, it takes about 2 hours. It's like if you can get the business owner on the phone, and again, we're not trying to reconcile bank statements. We're not trying to, you have to try really hard not to dive deep and start poking around the financials. But if you stay at a high level, you can do something like that over 2 to 3 hours. It's a morning or an afternoon. And so if you got a client you really care about that's struggling, I would say just do it for them. Nobody else is doing it for them. Nobody else is doing. Guys, you got to understand, if you have this relationship with a client, this strategic consulting relationship, you provide a peace of mind that goes so far and away beyond what it ever has before. Our clients appreciate us now more than they ever have before. And we've been there when we added $1 million to the bottom line, right? And it was like, oh yeah, Axiom's great. We love working with those guys. Now we take a phone call and, just listen and say, I think you should let that person go. I know it's a tough decision, but they weren't producing, they weren't meeting their draw. And I know it's tough, but this was a decision you should probably made 60, 90 days ago. And I really think you ought to. And I know it sucks. And they call me the next day and go, I don't know what I'd do without you. I don't know who I would call if we didn't have you to talk to. So I would say, the clients you care the most about, you ought to be checking in with them. And I hear this too. This is the other thing that kind of bugs me that's going on in our industry right now is you got people saying, reach out to your clients and make sure you care. You know what? If that's all you're doing is calling your clients to say, how are you doing? There's a part of me that wants to believe the only reason you're doing that is because you're worried about losing the client. If you're going to go to the trouble to call the client and ask how they're doing, you ought to do what you're really, really good at, which is crunch some numbers, look forward for them past the point where they can, because they're so wrapped up emotionally and tied into this, they can't think straight. You're the person they can't bring themselves to imagine a 50% decline in sales every month for the rest of the year, right? Emotionally, they just can't get themselves to even put that number in a spreadsheet. You can do it. I mean, you're kind of emotionally tied to the business, but not to the same extent they are. So, if you care about your clients, yeah, call them and check on them, ask how they're doing, but ask, how long is your cash going to last? Do you know? How much cash do you have in the bank right now? Which customers have you lost in the last week? Which ones are you worried about losing tomorrow? What are your people doing to see if they can save those relationships? Who's worried about losing their job? Who's already on your team has a spouse who's lost a job, and they're on pins and needles just wondering when the next shoe is going to drop and they're not going to have a paycheck to put food on the table? How many of your employees do you think are paycheck to paycheck? Like, these are the kind of conversations you should be having with clients that are actually going to add value, not calling them up and saying, how you doing today? The news sucks. Like, they don't have time for that phone call. Trust me. They got way more important things to do than take a call from you asking how they're doing. So, I mean, offer value, like real substantive value that's going to help them. Let me see if there are any other questions. Peggy, Jeff, I agree with your way of thinking. The thing is, how do you message your marketing without being a shark taking advantage of the situation? Great point. We have a client who's in HVAC. They have a product. They've had a product on the shelf. They've been selling the product for a while, over a year probably. This product, it's the list of clinical places and evidence. It's basically a UV ionization peroxide product that goes in your duct, and it cleans your air in your entire house. And it's been proven to work against SARS. It's been licensed or vetted by the Chinese government for using in Centers for Infectious Disease. It's just a laundry list of all the tests, right? And they even say, so they put out a Facebook ad and they said, hey, we have this thing. Look, there's no evidence, there's no testing specifically on coronavirus, but these other viruses, it's 99.9% effective in killing it, right? And we're basically selling it at cost for the rest of this month. You wouldn't believe the flack they took for trying to capitalize on the situation. So Peggy, I'm super sensitive to what you're saying. Like, you don't want to be seen as a shark who's just trying to capitalize. That's why I think, we work our asses off to try to get referrals and get into conversations, knowing, I'll speak for us, knowing that our typical sales cycle is going to be 2-3 months. Like, I'm not a close the person on the phone, give me your credit card kind of guy. Like, we get to know you. We tell you about our strategic assessment. We gauge your interest. You call a couple of referrals, and then you say, let's go ahead and get started. So if I'm already accustomed to, I meet somebody today in the real world without a coronavirus, it's going to take me 3 or 4 weeks, potentially, maybe 2 to 4 weeks earliest, and sometimes 4 to 8, 12 weeks to close them as a client. And I have a business owner who walks into my door today and says, I need help. I don't know if my business is going to survive. I shouldn't change my thinking to try to close that deal today, right? I should treat it just like any other lead, any other referral, knowing it's going to take 2, 3, 4 weeks, maybe 6, maybe 8, maybe 12 weeks. So I think treat these opportunities the same way you would relationship leads. The only difference between now and then, obviously the environment we're in, but in the psyche of the business owner, there's a lot of desperation. And ethically, I think we should pause when we're trying to sell something to somebody who's desperate. I don't think that's a good spot for us to be in. But it's a great question. Angie says, I have a client who started his business last year. Will he be able to secure SBA loan since he doesn't have business history? 2019 was a sole proprietorship, incorporated in 2020. Angie, I am not the expert on this, but I do believe that there are provisions in there specifically for businesses that weren't in existence and during the look back period. They're talking about 2019. So you can look back at like the wages from January this year to February. I want to say February 20th is the date that a lot of them are using. For FTEs, if you weren't in business for last year. So I do think there are going to be options for those folks. Tim Cernit, I put together a summary doc for clients on the CARES Act payroll protection plan. Happy to share it. That's awesome. I don't really know how to manage this. Consulting CPA has a Facebook page. Axiom does too. I've got emails for a lot of folks, but Tim, if you want to send that to me, I'll just send out another announcement. Maybe we'll put together a special page and just start putting resources there for you guys. But Tim, if you want to send it to me, if anybody wants to reach directly out to Tim, thank you, Tim. That's awesome. Oh, I should have read farther. He already put it in the chat, so perfect. Angie's created a summary of resources, put it here. That's fantastic. Thank you, Angie. And Paul shared a website on his law firm Velocity page. Fantastic. Any other questions you guys have? Let me know if you want to do this next week. Like I said, we'll make space for it. I think it's good for us to share ideas with each other and collaborate. And I'm happy to share what our experiences are going to be over the next 4 days. And we'll just take it from there. Yes, I will share the Excel spreadsheet. Let me do that real quick. So here's the link to the Google Doc. I'll also send this out. Oops, Jeff, I just sent that to you privately. There it is. All right, so a few people are chiming in for next week. So we'll definitely do that. If you guys have questions in the meantime, or you want to reach out directly to me, I think pretty much everybody has my contact information, so feel free to do that. Last week was a very heavy week appointment-wise. This week, mercifully, is a little bit slower. So if you need help with something, just let me know. All right, guys. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for giving me your time. And thanks for all your help. Appreciate it. Y'all have a great week.
Thank you, Joey.
All right. See you guys.